Thanks a lot. It looked like Formula One. I mean, what just happened on stage with volunteers changing the setting of chairs and bringing fresh water bottles, which again shows how important it is to have the team ready, and I'm very proud of that. Major General, thanks a lot for being here. I know this is your first time in Lithuania. You have served in military for many, many years, and now you're at a very important tech company. Can you bridge those two things together? You have vast experience in military, and you're obviously now helping militaries and defense industries and companies and institutions to become more effective. So what's the link between those two experiences of yours?
Thanks, Linas, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk about Palantir and what we're doing. So I think the problem we're trying to solve is really a simple one, right? And I think it's what every chief of defense or every tactical commander wants to solve, right? And it's this idea of enhanced real-time understanding that enables data decision-making, right, at scale and speed, right? It's real simple, right, is what we're trying to do. And so my experience, I've been a chief of staff 4 times, I've been a commander. This is always a problem that you try to overcome in the current environment, right, which now is proliferated with information. Commanders and staff are overloaded. And I'll just kind of set this up with kind of a scene of what it looks like in probably 95% of the operations centers in any organization. You'll walk in there and they'll have a bunch of screens similar to what you see behind me, but probably 3 times as many. And it looks pretty impressive, right? Because each one has its own map, its own information. And then what you find out is that none of those systems, or most of those systems, don't talk to one another. And then what you find is what the staff does, the staff's contribution is the same thing that we've been doing for 30 years, is using the Microsoft Office suite of tools for warfighting, right? You limit the staff to PowerPoint slides and what they can fit on an 8.5, 11 sheet of paper, right? And it is hugely problematic, and what you're relying on is the senior leader to integrate all that to make decisions, and I don't think that we're really doing them justice. And where I come full circle is I was a customer of Palantir, and we used Maven Smart System, and it's a paradigm shift in terms of getting towards solving that problem. And I could talk more about that again.
Yeah, so data-driven approach is certainly what matters. How do you see the change happening over the last 5 or 10 years in real life, in the lives of decision makers that have to tackle the issue of having so much data points, coming their way, but not necessarily kind of prioritizing well on which ones matter and which ones are just a noise?
Yeah, I think I don't know that there's been a lot of progress in the last 5 years. We largely operate the same. In fact, I can extrapolate and take you back to what Eisenhower did in World War II. We're not far from that, right? We're digitized in the sense that some systems are automatically feeding data, but if you can't integrate the data, they're all separate pictures, right? There's very little fusion going on. Sure, you can fuse in the Intel space, but you need to fuse a lot of the things, with the Intel community with everybody else, right? And we struggle to do that, right? So that's one key problem, is that we have growth in domains, now space domain, cyber domain that we focus on, is getting those domains to integrate and be able to see common things that you need to see to make decisions. That's one aspect of it. Data being able to be shared to be able to make that integration becomes a challenge. And then the other piece is probably more important to the allies, is how do you share that information? And largely the information that we share, that we measure from interoperability standpoint, is unfortunately email, which is PowerPoint slides, or it's Excel spreadsheets. Right, and so that's the way most organizations still operate, and that's the struggle that we got to overcome. It's evolved a little bit, but primarily it's still a slide deck that folks are looking through, and it is stale information the moment the slide is made and collated.
I've heard quite a few times from ministries of defense saying that Palantir and similar, even though I don't know if there are any companies at the same level and quality as Palantir, probably not. This is a unique value proposal, but you also have to deal with a very sensitive sector. I mean, defense, top secret information, intelligence, and allowing a company to be a part of that conversation, which includes a lot of sensitive information, is probably tricky. So how do you deal with that? How do you convince that what you are doing is not going to expose ministries again or intelligence community to leaks of information?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's often in the news. And so one is, Palantir is not a data company, right? So we don't buy, we don't sell data. That's one aspect of it. We integrate data, right? And we leverage AI tools to be able to make that useful to enable decision making. So in the organization, right, we're using your data on your systems, on your stacks, right, automating your workflows. And then we go through great pains to make sure that that data is protected. So that you know, every employee goes through a significant amount of training. There's a lot of care and due diligence to make sure that you know, that there is not a problem where people perceive that we're looking at you know, any of the population. It is the government's tool to use, and it's their data, and we work with them to automate the workflows for that.
Certainly, Ukraine is a live laboratory of some of the newest, you know, tech developments in military. That's the unfortunate part of Ukraine being attacked by Russia, but certainly developing in many ways to tackle a much bigger adversary. So what lessons do you learn from Ukraine? Let's have a broader picture. How does the nature of warfare changed in your perspective? Is there a major change happening? Because some say, look, we've never talked about drones as much as we do today, and that's not going to change. Others argue, well, we still talk about some of the same stuff that we could have been talking about decades ago. Manpower shortage, reserves, and similar. So is there a major change happening in military at the moment?
Well, I think there's some change that we see. I think you know, the one that everybody talks about all the time is you're collapsing kill change, right? So what's happening very quickly is all the sensors that are now on the battlefield, whether they fly, right? They're terrestrial sensors or even in other domains, right? The information that becomes available, right, will make the, you know, will collapse the kill change. You can see things very quickly. If you can't act on it, you're going to miss an opportunity. So I think that's one aspect. And so you got to leverage the AI, which is what Ukraine is doing, right, to be able to rapidly do object recognition and put an effector on a target. I think that's one piece. You know, the discussion about mass still matters, right? A lot of people talk about that where unmanned vehicles, whether it's in the maritime domain or the air domain, right, that's an aspect of mass that is new, right? And it's, you know, the nature of the character of warfare, that's more along the character side of warfare. It's obviously growth and proliferation, and they provide value, but I don't think we can dismiss that it makes armored formations obsolete, right? We got to be able to watch. They got into a war of attrition, right? We're static lines, and I still think that maneuver warfare, right, is a key piece of it. We just got to make sure we don't lose that lesson. But I think the adaptation cycles are have accelerated over time, right? Is that we don't implement and learn lessons in months. We now learn it and implement change in weeks. And that can be highly attributed to our ability to be able to use data to learn those lessons and rapidly implement and affect change.
AI certainly increases effectiveness in some ways, but it also poses challenges. And we know that in conversations between the US and China, the ethical component about, you know, including autonomous systems into warfare is important. You have to find the right balance between systems making decisions on behalf of the governments and still being able to control what's done on the ground that could have major implications for geopolitics or the survival of the planet Earth, I suppose, in the future, if that includes the nuclear dimension as well. Is there a right balance between those two things? Do we know where it lies and how maybe you can see some differences between the approach taken by the Western countries, the US and European allies, and countries such as China?
Yeah, I think our approach is always, I mean, there's a huge ethical component that I think that is the biggest concern. I mean, you've seen some problems that have already arisen out of large language models. This, at least Palantir's approach, this does not replace a commander or a decision maker on the battlefield. It only enables it. So a human, you know, in the loop to train the models, a human on the loop, right? So when you look at what are the guardrails, you know, one key guardrail obviously is anything that's a lethal decision. There's got to be a human in or on the loop that makes that decision, but we also got to be able to leverage the technology. You got to find the right balance. You know, an air-to-air engagement by aircraft, right, where, you know, collateral damage is minimal, right? It's a different degree of risk that you accept there versus, you know, operating it and targeting in an urban environment where there'll be civilians. But you do need to account for that and try to leverage the technology in that space. So I think that's one. Anywhere where you use AI to enable decision-making that risks strategic escalation. I think those are areas that you got to watch. And then, of course, the ethical legal boundaries of the law of armed conflict. Right? I think those are key components. But good organizations, and the way we drive that in the U.S. military is that that is part of the decision making. That's part of the culture that you build. None of this should be on autopilot.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe you can pinpoint one particular myth about AI in defense that you would like to tackle. Do you see, it's a new technology. It's hard to understand it well. It's a black box for many people, including myself. But can you, name one particular myth that should be tackled in order for us to be better informed about the current stage of the technology and its potential in the future?
Okay, I think the first one I talked about, it's not going to replace decision-making on a battlefield. I think more importantly, I think, and I speak at a lot of conferences, and I'm always surprised at how many people still talk in the theoretical about AI and what it can do for you, right? It's all pie in the sky. It's never anything that's about practical application. So when we started this discussion, what Palantir's product is able to do is ingest all of your data in your organization, right? It can cleanse it and makes it available for AI to use. Okay, so the technology is here now. People are concerned about that. In many cases, the other governments, intel services, and other governments, police forces are already using the product. On the defense side, the defense is lagging for some reason, right? The technology is here now. It's available to be used now. And it's technology that is in hands of your adversaries also is right now. So you're in an arms race. And the question is, do you want to be first and win in the arms race, or do you want to continue to wait, right, till it becomes perfect? It's never going to be perfect. Human interaction with the technology is the key piece of that. But you also can't wait for someone to come in and teach you what you need to understand about it. The biggest hurdle that you will have to overcome implementing these capabilities in your organization is your organizational culture. The technology exists. We can ingest the data. We can make sense of the data and layer on top of that AI tools that you can use and affect change immediately, right? But the organization, right, needs to be able to organize itself and educate the workforce about the tools that are available to you now. A black box is something that you plug in and you run and hope that it's going to solve your problems. The Palantir product is not like that. Forward deployed engineers is how we operate. So we come on site with the customer. What workflows do you want to integrate? And it's about pulling in those priority data sets, layering on top the AI tools to make your life easier, right? So this is about reducing the cognitive load in the staff in an organization, making sense of the data that's available to you in real time. So you operate off of live data, not stale PowerPoint. So the commanders can make more informed decisions, or leaders in industry can make more informed decisions. That's what this is ultimately about. And it's here, it's now, it's available.
And how does that differ when you consider the differences of size and quantity of militaries? For instance, the United States and Lithuania are very different in scale. Does that differ, the leverage we can use, coming from technologies such as Palantir or AI in a more general way?
So I think it scales. I think, when everybody claims, because the United States is great because it's so big, but it's also a bigger problem to tackle. So I think, everybody has an all-domain issue that you need to integrate all the domains of information that's available to you from all the domains that you do fight in. But moving to a data-centric organization and leveraging the AI tools is the best way to get after sharing. Almost 90% of intel that goes into the NATO C2 structure comes from the United States. We can't continue to limit ourselves to a Word document or PowerPoint document to share via email. We need to be sharing data objects, streaming live, and that's what we're trying to, get to. And then the 32, the other 31 of NATO benefit from that technology being available there.
So coming to an end, by the time we meet next year, in November or December, what would you like to see achieved, again, in 12 months that are coming up in your area of work? And what's the biggest risk that you need to consider in trying to achieve that goal?
Yeah, so it's not about what Palantir can do. The risk is inaction, right? Because right now, as I said, the technology exists. Coming into your organization, you can affect change, right, in a matter of weeks, just based on how fast you can integrate the data, right? If you continue to get caught up in lengthy procurement processes, right, I always tell people, what's the value of it? If anything were to go wrong, right, that's of data and information that's available to you, What's the value of that information for senior leaders, right, whether they're political or military, to make those decisions? So the risk is inaction on, you know, a potential customer's end. And, you know, Palantir is not trying to crowd everybody out of this, right? There's plenty of room for other companies to be able to participate in the process. Technology breeds innovation, right? People bring other unique solutions as part of the larger ecosystem. But I just think this idea of inaction, right, will also, you know, put at risk innovation.
Major General, thanks for being here today.